Hello everyone, and welcome to a very quick overview of the communications component of the FSDS program. This is what we will be doing together for the next few months. Your institution agreed that it would be a good idea to work in collaboration with FSDS in order to improve some of the basic communication related skills and abilities that the students need to have. Based on our experience so far, when we start off, some of these basic skills include being able to observe closely, whether it is spaces, buildings, or other elements of the built environment, or even something as simple as a piece of furniture. This is what we consider to be part of thinking like a designer or an architect all the time. And once the eye and other senses are used to observing, it comes down to being able to articulate these observations in the right words, the right sequence, with clarity and eloquence. Another important aspect we have identified is the ability to conduct the kind of research that will be needed to ensure that one is aware of the history of the discipline, the way other designers and architects have approached concerns similar to what they have. Within the ambit of research skills, for those that make sure reading does not seem like a daunting task anymore, identifying the right sources of information is easier, and so is developing an ethical approach to acknowledging them. All of this, though, is still a continuation of work towards building logical links, identifying key concepts, themes, an argument, which are skills which in themselves come in handy to structure our thoughts and think about our own work. Along with this, there is another set of skills that is even more specifically related to our work. That is the ability to identify what and how needs to be said about our work depending on circumstances. For instance, it takes training and practice to be able to narrow down to what we should put into an introduction to our design that goes into a portfolio, an exhibition, or a project proposal. It takes a different kind of training to identify how to explain the stages of a process we have undergone for an audience of peers but also of people who do not share our background. And in this context, it also takes practice and skills to be able to make presentations that don't send our audiences to sleep, to write emails and put together samples of our work. There are very specific writing or oral communication related components to each of these broad categories of skills. There are also others that cut across. For instance, the ability to structure a text, make sure it uses the right headings and subheadings, make sure the images have captions or labels and that these are meaningful. All these are things we take for granted, but often young employees are unable to see such tasks through. With these very basic skills in mind, we have put together exercises which fall under 4 broad modules, which would allow us to share techniques with the students, see them through the process of putting these into practice, and guide them so that their ability to write and communicate effectively increases. The first module, an eye for detail, will require the students to undertake a description of a space through which they will work on their observation skills, but also be introduced to titles, captions, writing logically sequenced paragraphs and structuring text, and to using images and captions meaningfully. This will be the first time for them working with writing feedback, so the exercises will constitute an introduction to addressing feedback as well. Of the reading, writing, making sense module, we will look at 4 exercises, focusing on the ability to identify a focus area for research, to find sources and compile a bibliography, that is to say, engage in ethical research, all of that leading up to a concept note and a presentation. This will allow us to integrate multiple skills sequentially and at each stage provide feedback focused on specific sets of skills. There will be one component requiring the students to document their work, This will be directly related to the ongoing studio exercise and will focus on talking meaningfully to a lay audience about the process that has led to specific design decisions. And finally, the students will also have to write formal emails, also focusing on their ongoing studio exercises, and put together a sample of what their portfolios might look like with a specific requirement in mind. What is important to remember is that the tutors are the most important part of this process. We need to love writing, to love seeing how the students' writing and presentation skills can improve, and to love reading through their work and providing comments in a way that is engaging and constructive and constantly keeping in mind the specific skills we are focusing on for each exercise. But more than anything, what is important is the time and care that the tutors and TAs will spend working with the students' drafts. Let's take the first exercise for example. We will work on a space description and the students will have access to all the videos and presentations for the exercise before we begin. They will be encouraged to go through them beforehand so that the class can be devoted as much as possible to writing. During class on Thursday, the students will submit a first draft of their descriptions. That is 50 drafts divided between 2 TAs. The first thing to do will be for each of the TAs to quickly use the feedback guidelines which mention what to focus on, covering all aspects of the description, appropriate photographs and so forth, and provide feedback on one draft each. This will allow the tutor, and especially for this exercise, the FSDS team, to go through the drafts and point out how the feedback may work better so that Thursday and Friday can be spent on providing feedback to all the student drafts. Once this is done, the students will have something to work on the following day, which is on Monday in class. By the end of Monday, they will have second drafts, into which they have incorporated the changes you suggested, and the tutor and TAs will once again have to look at them and provide feedback. This time, the feedback will not focus on covering content anymore, but on whether the text flows well, whether the captions are articulated effectively, whether there is a connection between the text and the captions and the images, and this will again take a couple of days. In the meanwhile, as we work on feedback for the first exercise, we will need to prepare for the second. The materials for the second exercise will begin to be shared during the same week and they will be followed by capacity building. This requires a lot of focus and clarity on the part of the faculty, especially since the writing workshop kind of approach may be new to some of us. By the time the second exercise needs to be introduced though, we should all be ready. This is the kind of process we have in mind when we mention that the faculty and TAs have a huge role to play, both in class and after. And this is also what we have in mind when we say that working with writing will mean writing and providing feedback every day, keeping up the spirit and the joy of writing, and being able to encourage the students to do better.